As of this video, we're about 80% done with 2024, and there's quite a clear number one for the biggest grudge, the biggest rivalry of this year in televised professional wrestling. And maybe you disagree, but it feels like it's CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Kelm. We're going to break down the bitter war between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. Let us know what you think is your storyline, your feud of 2024, and what do you think of Punk versus Drew in the comments below. You think you know all the wrestling stories? There's more you haven't heard yet. Join us on Backstage Pass. With this rivalry having come to what we believe is its conclusion at Bad Blood 2024 in Atlanta, how the hell did the so-called injury-prone CM Punk and a villainous, very hubris, believing he's doing the right thing while doing very bad things, Drew McIntyre, have the best story of the year? Join us as we take a deep dive into the incredible feud of CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. The funny part about all of this is that it was never intended maybe to play out this way. Circumstances influenced it, and it kind of snowballed from there. WWE's chief content officer Triple H himself confirmed on the WrestleMania 40 behind-the-scenes documentary on YouTube, go give it a watch, that the original intended plan for the main event of Night 1 at this year's WrestleMania was Punk versus Rollins for the world title. Two men who very much do not like each other a whole lot and have said some very nasty, very real things about each other over the years. But at Royal Rumble, in Punk's very first televised match back in WWE in nearly 10 years, he suffered an injury, an untimely injury, to his right tricep as a result of Drew McIntyre's Future Shock DDT, or at least that's the belief, and Punk went on to eliminate the Scotsman from pursuing a big WrestleMania opportunity from the Rumble. Punk would eventually be the runner-up in the match to the man who would win it, Cody Rhodes. It was heartbreaking. Yes, if you were a fan of CM Punk, you were excited to see the road to WrestleMania for him to pursue that dream of headlining the show he's never got to headline. The big reason, the big motivator to come back to WWE after all the, lack of a better phrase, bad blood between him and the company in the years prior. Yeah, you were trying to turn chicken salad into not chicken shiz, but it was instantly realized there was a big money story to be told in these unfortunate circumstances. When you think back to November 2023, when Punk returned to that massive reaction at Survivor Series, I was there, it was huge, you probably had a list of opponents just running through your mind to see him face in this new WWE that he was coming back to. And Drew McIntyre would have probably been on that list, but nobody was really raving about how they wanted to see Punk versus Drew in particular. It was all Punk and Rollins at the front of that fan conversation. Drew would use this to become bigger than he was before, not someone who is out of the conversation, but the conversation heading into WrestleMania season, and maybe even putting himself into a world title scenario. Drew sunk his teeth into the opportunity of claiming that he shelved a major name in Punk during a critical time of the year on the night after Royal Rumble, interrupting Punk's speech to the WWE fandom, where Punk sadly had to declare he would miss Mania season. Drew would mock the Second City Saint in his vulnerable position with his arm in a sling. Drew would assault Punk right there after Punk declared he would rehab the injury, return to main event the show of shows, but that McIntyre would be first on his checklist. Well, the ground was set right there. The attack seemingly aggravating Punk's arm injury even further just 24 hours after it happened, with Punk getting it in a seriously bad position when Drew stomped on it. Yeah, he did that. This prompted Michael Cole to voice the feelings of the fans there in Tampa, Florida, when he laid into Drew, calling him a vile, disgusting, pathetic excuse for a man. The roles were set, and it made a lot of sense to pick things up in a new rivalry standing right there for Punk to come back to when he was ready. And McIntyre wouldn't shut up. As much as he had plans for WrestleMania season, he was still talking about CM Punk. and CM Punk's name never seemed to be out of the conversation that McIntyre was having with everyone. And throughout those early stages, CM Punk was silent, waiting in the wings, rebuilding his body to come back and fight. And like we said, CM Punk was originally going to headline WrestleMania 40, and that's a fact. But it was Drew McIntyre who stepped up and won the Elimination Chamber match in Perth, Australia to secure a world title shot against then World Heavyweight Champion Seth freaking Rollins, despite having lost to him at 2 previous occasions in late 2023 and early 2024. This time, the advantage was on Drew's side because Rollins had put himself in an incredibly doubtful position as the champion heading into the biggest show of the year. Not only was Rollins just cleared to return from an untimely MCL knee injury just before WrestleMania 40, his schedule was him going to be wrestling on both nights of the show. Yeah, he was involved in an entire bloodline situation, tagging with Cody versus The Rock and Roman Reigns on night 1, so he was never going to be 100% going into night 2 to face Drew McIntyre. This made it easy for Drew McIntyre, who repeatedly let Seth Rollins know how dumb his decision was to volunteer to wrestle both nights of Mania. Punk would make his presence known before WrestleMania in a significant way, announcing that he would be the special guest commentator for the World Heavyweight title clash between Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins, and an all-timer 3-way promo in his hometown of Chicago. It was quite the interesting performance for CM Punk, Rollins, and Drew. Punk may not have been actively in the competition, his arm in a bionic sling, but he dominated the scene on the microphone. He added a massive what-if element to the world title match as a non-competitor. It was an effective way to include him in WrestleMania if he couldn't compete. And this, as we know, would take things in the storyline to a whole new level. Rollins versus McIntyre would open WrestleMania Night 2, and as expected, it was easy pickings for the Scotsman, who could finally call himself a world champion after over 3 years and have his crowning WrestleMania moment that eluded him during the pandemic in front of live fans with his family in attendance. But yeah, here comes a dose of good old-fashioned karma. He could have simply celebrated with his wife and brother and walked away, but he chose to mock CM Punk with the world title and rub it in his face while standing on the announce table in front of a dapperly dressed CM Punk with his arm still in that bionic sling. Yeah, the second he looked away, Punk snatched his leg from underneath him and began attacking him with that bionic iron sling cast, allowing Damian Priest, Senior Money in the Bank, to cash in his anywhere, anytime world title contract and do it at WrestleMania. Drew McIntyre was the World Heavyweight Champion in front of a live crowd in Philadelphia at WrestleMania, but only for a few minutes. And CM Punk is the man who set up the ball to be dunked by Damian Priest, and Drew McIntyre was the hoop. Yeah, it all led to an incredible moment to open Night 2 of WrestleMania and really throw a bunch of gasoline on the issues between Drew McIntyre, who had his WrestleMania moment ruined, and CM Punk, who is still chasing his WrestleMania moment but had to get revenge first. And it was something quite special. What's the famous saying? Don't get mad, get even. CM Punk got mad, and he got even. Heck, he even got some with interest. But he wasn't done making Drew McIntyre's life a living hell. The next night on Raw, there was a fatal 4-way match to determine Damian Priest's first challenger for the world title. And obviously, Drew McIntyre wanted to be in the mix. In the match was Drew McIntyre and his rival around this time, someone he had issues with, the yeeting Jey Uso. CM Punk once again came out and held McIntyre's leg, literally holding him back from a world title opportunity, allowing Jey Uso to get the advantage and earn that number 1 contender spot at McIntyre's expense. Not only did Punk directly cost him the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania, but he was beginning to take even more and more away from Drew McIntyre. And the fact that Jey Uso, the man McIntyre hated more than everyone else, was the one to pin him only added salt on a fresh WrestleMania wound. things quieted down for a couple of months after Drew McIntyre would simply ask for a title shot, and Damian Priest, being the amazing champion he was, accepted it. Yeah, a fighting champion. What a new concept. That was something we're getting used to again in 2024 after Roman Reigns. And Priest accepted the challenge for Clash at the Castle in Scotland. Yeah, Drew McIntyre's home territory. He would have all of the momentum, right? He would have all the home field advantage. This was supposed to be McIntyre's true, unfiltered, pristine crowning moment, not only because of what happened to him at WrestleMania 40, because he got screwed in a previous Clash of the Castle card in the UK. If you remember, he was in the driver's seat to dethrone Roman Reigns, and he got screwed then in the UK in Wales. Now, in his home country of Scotland, he was gonna get it, right? A large reason why the bitterness remained within him for a year before he turned into the hubris-driven villain he was in 2024. As he was getting ready to have his moment, a man in a referee's clothing appeared out of nowhere, sliding perfectly into the shot for fans watching around the world on streaming WWE Network and Peacock. This man was CM Punk. He wasn't playing around. Costing McIntyre the World Heavyweight Championship once wasn't enough. He made it known as long as he was around, Drew McIntyre would not become world champion. It was another ultimate FU to Drew, who was ready to kill anybody on sight after he was denied another dream wrestling moment. This was fuel to a fire that needed to keep burning while CM Punk was still rehabbing from injury, but Drew McIntyre kept marching ahead and aimed for the Money in the Bank briefcase in order to get back into the title picture. McIntyre would be successful in acquiring the Money in the Bank briefcase as a way to fuel the story even further with McIntyre and Punk. You had to know this was coming. It may be predictable, but don't claim that predictable is bad when people were so invested in this story. This is before they ever even had a match, and months of buildup was coming with it. And we're throwing in another Money in the Bank briefcase. The same night when he attempted to cash in, CM Punk once again hijacked it, putting Drew in an unfortunate list of superstars who failed their Money in the Bank cash-in attempts. And as timing would work out after WrestleMania, CM Punk became medically cleared to compete. So it made sense that they would finally meet at one of the biggest shows of the year, SummerSlam in Cleveland, Ohio. It took half a year to get these two men into a highly anticipated match, both of them keeping the fire burning bright. McIntyre, by the way, dropped a lot of doozies on social media, making fun of Punk along the way. But now it was finally there. Before they ever actually had a match, they made an incredible story. Between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, it was a pretty one-sided thing in the sense that CM Punk was going to repeatedly make Drew McIntyre's life, as he said, a living hell. But this isn't to say that Drew wouldn't fire back himself and take this standing, as he would obliterate CM Punk in his All-State Arena return to Chicago on SmackDown, bloodying him and taking something from him very special. A friendship bracelet made for him by a fan with the names of CM Punk's beloved wife, AJ Lee, yes, former WWE superstar, and his beloved dog, Larry. McIntyre really leaned into his evil side, using the blood-stained memento to mock Punk prior to their collision in Ohio. But that wasn't all. Considering how much hatred there was between these two, it made sense to have a special guest referee, and that was someone that neither of them liked, and a man who didn't like neither of them either, Seth freaking Rollins. Yeah, he would officiate the match. At SummerSlam, with Rollins in a bedazzled referee outfit, McIntyre would literally use the precious friendship bracelet to distract Punk, the Second City Saint constricting his body in the agonizing Anaconda Vice would be distracted by all of this. Yes, with all the hoopla and shenanigans of a friendship bracelet, Drew McIntyre would capitalize, winning the match. Punk's first singles match back in WWE since 2014 was a big L for him and a huge W for McIntyre. It was the perfect double move because it helped further the situation with Punk and McIntyre, which we knew was going to be more than one match, and renew the seeds of discontent with Punk and Rollins for a rivalry down the line. Yeah, Rollins was involved in that messy scenario, a dusty finish, if you will. The reactions to the match from fans were somewhat polarizing. Some people saying it was a little bit overcooked, other people saying it was pretty solid, and the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. Yeah, this feud wasn't going to end with just one match, so Punk started going after McIntyre again, setting up part 2 at Bash in Berlin. This time, it would be a strap match stipulation. Yes, where the first person to touch all 4 corners consecutively would become the winner. CM Punk only had wrestled one televised singles match in 10.5 years before SummerSlam, and he was quickly beating the allegations of an old, washed-out guy or even injury-prone. He may not wrestle that often, but he looked fantastic and could deliver the notes on the microphone to make it matter once the bell rang. Bash in Berlin was another interesting storytelling masterclass, a match that was certainly more well-received than their SummerSlam bout, with CM Punk making sure that he completely took McIntyre out before touching the last corner. Yeah, that second GTS really mattered. In his mind, it was enough to move on, pursue the goal of becoming World Heavyweight Champion, even bringing up Gunther's name. But Drew, in his mind, he still had a bone to pick. He wasn't done with Punk. It made sense that since they were both one-on-one, that a rubber match was called for. McIntyre officially had a pin over Punk. Punk only touched the 4 corners, but had a victory over Drew. He never pinned him, though. This doesn't invalidate his win, but a pinfall or a submission objectively is a little bit more decisive in the record books and in the eyes of those hardcore fans ticky-tapping on the internet. Although CM Punk completely dismissed the fans' idea about facing Drew McIntyre in a Hell in a Cell match back in June after Clash at the Castle, yeah, a fan brought it up to him, but it seemed like that fan made it a destiny. Considering that Bad Blood was the host of the first ever Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker many years ago, it only made sense that Bad Blood would flow once again in the most satanic structure in the WWE. Hell in a Cell. Yes, a big cage match, a big feud, a big way to blow it off. CM Punk and McIntyre would go to hell. This was the way to end it, and by this point, WWE was wary of how quickly things could break down between these two, so every effort was made to ensure they wouldn't lay a finger on each other before the door would close on the cell. By the time they got to Atlanta, Georgia, yeah, they were both chewing at a Georgia peach to get their hands on each other. And ideally, a story that had been built up this long should have been the main event, the final match of the night on the premium live event of Bad Blood, but they saved that for The Rock's return. We have other videos about that, by the way. There was nothing much that could be done, but that didn't mean that Punk and McIntyre wouldn't get all of the meaty time they needed on this presentation to devour one another in front of fans watching around the world. This didn't stop them from having the best match of their trilogy, and undoubtedly one of the best Hell in a Cell matches people have seen in quite some time. It certainly helped that WWE decided to abandon that god-awful red Hell in a Cell in favor of the traditional silver steel structure. But after having 2 really solid matches, the anticipation needed to be delivered upon. The 2 had their best match yet. Yes, this is how you close a trilogy. This was a violent, hardcore, bloody, personal, just absolutely massacre-driven match. There are big-budget action movies with less action than this incredible match. One of the best of 2024 so far in terms of a hardcore stipulation, and this was hardcore. It was Atlanta, but you may as well thought it was ECW Philadelphia back in the day, because they literally used everything they could to beat the hell out of each other inside the cell, including the cell. Blood was shed, body parts were damaged and bruised. Yes, the match was everything Hell in a Cell was meant to be, a violent spectacle. Still, this wasn't violence for the sake of nothing. It was violence initiated by months and months of building anticipation and such a long personal issue between two men. Even the vicious Drew McIntyre admitted before the match that if he could go back and change the way he approached Punk, he would have. But it was too late. They did everything, even dropping a toolbox on each other's head. Drew McIntyre missing a Claymore kick and landing on the end of his back on the steel steps. It was brutal. Yeah, it may not have been a technical masterpiece, but that's not the point. This was a bloody, hardcore fight to the end. CM Punk would stand tall, barely standing at the end of it, as the victor in a battle that wrecked the ring, stained it with blood, steel chairs, steel ring steps, and beads of a friendship bracelet never built, but certainly a feud that had come to an end. That's how you end a grudge match. It had an edge to it. We can't think of a better way to end it at all. Maybe you could have thought of a better way to end it all. Let us know in the comments below. On one hand, it's sort of sad to see this rivalry, the best of the year in the eyes of many, come to a close. But on the other hand, it's probably best to leave it where it is instead of dragging it out too long. You could call it recency bias on our end. Yeah, it just happened and it was really cool, and we wouldn't even knock you for it. But in our minds, this is legitimately one of the best stories with matches tied to it of the past few years. Yeah, up there with the Bloodline stuff. Definitely the best we've seen from Punk since his run with MJF back in AEW, and maybe even the biggest story of Drew McIntyre's career so far. No matter how you're feeling, and we want to know how you're feeling in the comments below, we expect keyboard warriors to come at us for saying, "How dare you even put this near the precious Bloodline!" But you're still witnessing something go down in modern wrestling history that can best be described as a really personal issue that got paid off. Punk versus Drew is certainly a rivalry that will be looked at fondly in the years to come. It sums up how great Punk's return to WWE feels like. I know he has his detractors, but you can see he is coming back for the right reasons, for the right pro wrestling reasons, and doing right by pro wrestlers he's working with. Drew McIntyre is a bigger superstar than he was a year ago. Even if Punk felt like he was never, ever coming back to pro wrestling, let alone WWE years ago, this felt like the culmination of his homecoming tour in the truest sense. Plus all the stuff he's had to deal with, injuries and the backstage politics, the AEW things. That's not a part of what this was. This was great pro wrestling. He's in a healthier locker room. He's embracing his role, guiding young, up-and-coming talent, contributing to WWE NXT with names like Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, and Trick Williams, among others. He's genuinely seeming to love his position as a veteran in modern WWE. And props to Drew McIntyre. He took his villainous run to a whole new level with CM Punk. And it's a perfect example of how two superstars push each other to get better and have a better story. For Drew, for Punk, they help push themselves to a next level under very challenging circumstances where one of the players couldn't be there every single week. And this was a story in 2024 WWE that wasn't strictly driven around the world title, but playing off of the world title. It's also worth noting, for Punk, Drew McIntyre proved to be the perfect dance partner who helped him show the world that he's far from, as the kids say, washed. Yeah, some of you are claiming that, but Punk was in the game here, fighting through an injury and still delivering that best in the world for a reason. Yeah, this may not have been a technical masterpiece to end the trilogy, but like we said before, that's not the point. It's supposed to be a bloody war, and you got that, and then the good guy won, and it felt good. What's the problem? For that, we hope Drew McIntyre becomes a huge beneficiary of this rivalry, despite being on the losing end. You don't have to win a match to be someone who truly benefits from it. He made a lot more storyline sense to have CM Punk be the victor, but it makes long-term sense to strap the rocket to Drew McIntyre and see what he can do with it now as a certified, cemented. It is one one of those stories that we're going to be talking about in the years to come. It's also everyone behind the scenes who contributed to this situation, the creative team, the production people, all the people that made all the dots connect to make this matter. So that was the story, a very good one, between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. Maybe one of the best modern day wrestling rivalries we've seen in quite some time. What did you think of it? How would you rank it? What are some of your favorite grudge personal rivalries in wrestling history? Let us know in those comments below. Come on, I want to hear from you. And check out these other great videos from Sportskeeda Wrestling. Also, hit the like button or I'm going to go and find you and steal your friendship bracelet.